The chairman of the US Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, has pledged more cooperation with Israel despite Tel Aviv's brutal crackdown against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and the besieged Gaza Strip. Dunford said he made Israel his first stop to reflect the importance of the relationship between Washington and Tel Aviv. During his two-day stay, Dunford discussed an annual military aid package worth $3 billion for Israel to replace the current agreement, which ends in 2017. Talks were earlier stalled by Netanyahu himself in protest at Iran's nuclear agreement with the P5+1 countries. That's Britain, China, France, Russia and the United States plus Germany in July. Tel Aviv spends most of the US aid to buy American military hardware, such as jets and components for missile systems. The latest pledge comes during Israeli violence against Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territories. Tensions flared after Israel restricted the entry of Palestinian worshippers into the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Dozens of Palestinians have been killed in clashes with Israeli forces and settlers across the occupied territories. Why doesn't the US condemn Israel's lethal crackdown against Palestinians? How should we feel about Washington's willingness to effectively bankroll weapons used to kill Palestinians? And does the US care more about poor American families or selling weapons to Israel? These are the simple questions we sought to answer. Now, Israel has occupied the West Bank for around 50 years. Imagine ISIL occupying your country and controlling whatever you and your family did. What would you do to reclaim your country? That's the question we put to the public here in Britain.
I think it would be highly recommended to push them away and repel them, because I think it would corrupt whatever settlement we already have here in the UK and the Western world, and it would disrupt that main part. That's my opinion.
As in, do I think military force would be worth it? Yes, but only to protect what's home and where I should feel safe.
I don't know, because I'm still quite young, so I don't know what I would do other than I don't know, just leave the country, or because I do have another house in Morocco, so I don't know whether we would go there or what would happen. But I do have family in Israel actually, so I do know what's going on there and stuff, and it is really.
I think that in the case of ISIS, the only way to win my freedom would to use violence, as I don't think they would really respond to peaceful protests.
I don't think violence is the answer, but if it's necessary to use to win our country back, then we have to.
What do our experts regard as reasonable action when it comes to the question of reclaiming your country?
Not just if anyone occupied your country, even if anyone occupied your house, or breaking into your house, or stealing your car, or stealing any of your property, or made any aggressive act against your rights, your property, etc., you will find yourself in a position to resist. So the nature of people, even of animals, to resist against any aggression. So what will happen for a people who suddenly found themselves kicked out of their land, kicked out of their houses, just because a new state will be built for people coming from overseas to build a country? They said that God promised them with this country and with this state. So I think it's a natural reaction from the Palestinian as well as from anybody else if they got kicked out of their houses, kicked out of their countries, to resist.
And I think first of all, it's a correct parallel between the white colonial settler state of so-called Israel and Daesh, because the parallel is this: they are both supremacist regimes and movements. They both consider themselves God's chosen people, and anyone outside of that club is worthy of total annihilation. So the parallel is correct. Now, the question is, what would one do if Daesh was occupying one's own land. Well, that depends on the consciousness of the people, the mobilization of the people, etc. And also tactically in how we want to fight the liberation war. There's the mass element, the civil element, which is doesn't hold weapons, perhaps stones and slings and sometimes petrol bombs. And then there's the armed wing as well, and the armed factions. And how these two correlate with each other is dependent on the leadership and dependent on the people. But the fundamental issue is this, that it's a just struggle for liberation against a supremacist movement that's backed up directly and indirectly by the biggest supremacist regimes in London, Paris and Washington.
Israel has killed thousands of Palestinian children in the last 6 years alone, using US military funding and weapons. Do the public regard it as hypocritical to preach about protecting children while US weapons are being used to do the opposite?
Hypocrisy is a problematic area because I think all countries, in their own interests, will bend the rules to suit what they think is appropriate at the time.
Yeah, of course, because I mean, it's like, from one hand you're saying how, you know, you're trying to protect people, and then from the other hand you're sort of doing the complete opposite. I personally myself, I don't feel what they're doing is ethical or right in any. It can't be justified, no matter how they like to dress it up in newspapers or on television.
I don't think America knows what they're using the weapons for, and I think America just wants money, so they don't really care what the weapons are being used for, they just want the money for the weapons.
Well, it's obviously clear that they need to take more control of what they're producing and how they're pushing it around their country, because that's where it's getting taken away. I mean, they should obviously work on a better way to privatize what they're doing, what they're making, and how they're hiding it from the public. Because if it's going away, if it's hitting Palestine, then obviously they're not doing a good job. And people can argue the fact that, well, you can take better care, in instance or indirectly, you are funding what's going on. But however, just because it's not intentional doesn't mean it's not happening.
Yes, definitely. I think it's true, and also you think about even situations like Hurricane Katrina and stuff like that, and you know, they haven't sorted their situation out. So yeah.
What do our experts make of Israel's huge Palestinian death toll of children? And do they see any double standards in preaching protection of children while America's own weapons are used to kill them?
Unfortunately, the US has been, since the establishment of Israel in 1948, taking part in supporting Israel with unlimited funds and arms. Against all what we hear from the American politicians and human rights activists, especially on the government and other institution levels, we found that the Americans can talk about human rights anywhere in the world, but not in Palestine. Sometimes you feel them, they don't see, but most likely they ignore. It's like the Palestinian life and the Palestinian rights worth nothing for them, while this gives a kind of green light to the Israeli to break all laws and feel like that they are above the laws, so they can do whatever, whenever, against whoever.
Well, first of all, the United States is the big granddaddy of Zionism across the planet, perhaps only second to the United Kingdom, which is the original one. And of course it's hypocritical when it bemoans the killing of children. How many children has the United States killed across the world? How many millions of children did they kill in Korea in the Korean War in the early 50s, in Vietnam in the late 60s and 70s, in Iraq and Afghanistan most recently, and Libya? So when it bemoans the fact that its own primary, number one ally in the region is conducting massacres against children, well, we know what the record of the United States themselves are on this score.
The US military chief has pledged more cooperation with Israel despite that regime's brutal ongoing crackdown against Palestinians. Why doesn't the US condemn this? We asked the public.
Probably as just a civilian I don't know all the insights that is going on in the politics between US and Israel. They might have some hidden agendas that we are not clear about, and the things that they brush under the carpet, so to speak, so they don't really voice everything out. And I just think we just don't know everything.
That's a good question, actually. Why? Because it's beneficial to them, isn't it? The more violence Israel is creating, the more weaponry is sold. The more weaponry is sold, the greater the profit that their country actually gets.
No idea. I wish I knew the answer to that question. I have no idea. It's really upsetting. And I've been asking, I lived there for 15 years. I don't know. I don't understand. People get really defensive. I don't know why.
Well, I definitely do. I think all that's involved there is money. Why would America supply weapons to Israel? I just don't understand that. Because I think Israel is sort of trying to rebel against a lot of countries at the moment. Why would America help them out in doing so?
Well, they're tied up with Israel through business. It's financial. It's so complicated, I just can't put it into words. I don't understand it myself.
I think America feels that Israel is doing the right thing because it's not really a secret that America isn't the biggest fan of Islam as a religion and Muslims, and I think Israel and America share that opinion, unfortunately. So I think it would be quite hypocritical of America to condemn the killing of Muslims when they're doing the same thing.
Why does the United States seem so unwilling to criticize Israel's oppression of Palestinians? We asked our experts.
Unfortunately, again, we know that the pro-Israeli lobby in the United States is very rich and it's very penetrated within the institution, and they are very influential. They are very influential in the political and the media levels. They own most of the local even newspapers and TV stations. So they can send whatever messages to the public, to the audience, which is serve in the end of the day, serve Israel and what the Israeli they are doing in Palestine. Of course, this media lobby, pro-Israeli media, plus pro-Israeli lobby within the House of Congress, help Israel to do whatever they want in the occupied territories and feel that they are covered and they are protected by the strongest member of the UN Security Council, which is the US. So let's remember that whatever Israel has done of massacres, of killing, of occupying, of destroying, of expelling people from the occupied territories from Palestine, always the American veto, it was behind them and supporting them. That's why we see Israel acting as a state above and maybe beyond even the international law.
Well, while the Arab Spring, perhaps the Arab sting, was going well for the West and destroying Arab armies and societies and conducive to its domination across the region, while that was going well, perhaps Obama had a bit more of a critical stance, to some extent, small extent, towards Netanyahu and the regime in Tel Aviv. But now Russia has stepped in strategically at the invitation of the Syrian government, and there's a pushback against the imperialist-backed supremacist death squads in Syria. Then I think it's clear that the United States, again, definitely needs as a primary strategic ally Tel Aviv to promote and facilitate its strategic objectives. So I don't think in the foreseeable future we're going to see any real distancing from Washington, from Tel Aviv. Actually, I think Tel Aviv again has kind of re-ingratiated itself as a very important tool of Washington to facilitate its interests in the region.
America currently pays $3 billion to Israel per year, most of which is then spent to buy American weapons which are used to kill Palestinians. We asked the public how they feel about this.
I don't think it's right, because they shouldn't be using weapons. They should know what the weapon's being used for before they'd be able to sell them.
I don't like it one bit. I mean, because America haven't done much to stop what's going on. I know they're in plans or they're talking about it, they're supporting it, but they're not doing enough. I don't think they're doing enough. And for their weapons killing other people, you should take full-on responsibility for that. Whether it's someone else using it or not, you should take full responsibility.
Well, there's another thing. There's probably one of those things that we don't quite know how Israel is important to US. And Palestine is probably not as important.
Well, it's a cycle that's kept that country running for probably its whole entirety, really. I mean, whether it's been Palestine or whoever it is that they've managed to sell weapons to themselves, whoever. They seem to be a country that just loves to sell weapons and love to create drama.
It's not a pleasant one. I wouldn't like to say it's very different from what we do for Saudi, where a great deal of Saudi money goes into the British armaments industry, and the French, and the German, and the American. The arms trade as such is always a highly problematic area.
I don't have any feelings about that. It doesn't surprise me. It's just truly a world gone mad.
What is our experts' assessment of the billions the United States gives to Israel, which helps to bankroll the weapons used to kill Palestinians?
Of course, I feel very sad, I feel very bad, and more, I feel that the American, with their fund and with their arms, they are partner in the killing of the Palestinians. They are not objective or neutral party to observe or to sponsor any peace talks between the Palestinians and the Israeli. No, by giving Israel all this fund and supporting Israel with the newest technology in arms, they are partner. So they even hold as responsible for all this blood, Palestinian blood, was committed by the Israeli. So in somehow, yes, they are partner in the crime. And if the American want to be a kind of neutral sponsor for the peace process, or even to show kind of responsibility, they have first to stop funding Israel and to stop arming Israel. And I think this is very necessary step, as a first, very necessary measure, as a first step to believe that American can be an honest broker in any peace process in the Middle East.
Well, my personal feeling about it, it's that it's repugnant and it's disgusting. It's also illegal under international law that the United States is facilitating its client state in the region to break all kinds of international law in relation to its occupation of Palestinian land and its injustices and crimes in relation to that. But the Palestinian people are remaining steadfast and strong. The youth, the Shabab of Palestine, once again, a third generation, perhaps fourth generation, are in the leadership of fighting this usurping entity and for the liberation of itself. The liberation of Palestine is tied together to the liberation of the people of the region. If the people of the region are united and strong and vested in resistance, then the Palestinian people will be united in that trench of struggle as well.
Washington has pledged to give away even more money to Israel, resulting in a 10-year package worth nearly $40 billion. Does the US care more about poor American families or about selling weapons to Israel? That's a question we put to the public here in Britain.
Yes, I think it is. I think really they should sort out their own internal problems before, sorting out of everyone else's, and maybe they should encourage other countries to contribute to the problem.
I think that it just wants money and their weapons to be sold. They don't really care about what the weapons being sold for.
I think that America does focus a lot on the outside world and should probably focus more on its own home affairs.
A massive understatement. I didn't have healthcare for 6 years because I couldn't afford it as a PhD student working 3 jobs. So, understatement. Yes, they should be investing in their own people and sort of addressing the cultural issue. Why can you wipe out any sort of debt buying a car by filing a bankruptcy case and you're stuck with student loans for life? That makes no sense. I have way too many thoughts about that.
Well, I think America just concerns itself with how much money they're making, don't they? Not actually necessarily on people and individuals. I mean, it's a large business, isn't it?
Good business or good economy starts from within the country, and you've got to make sure that all your employees are employed, all the public is doing something or the other, contribute towards that. But if you're funding it towards the people who already have got tons of money, then you're not helping yourself or helping the world. Eventually it's going to backfire on you.
Given the huge spending package to Israel, which does matter more to American politicians, selling arms to Tel Aviv or dealing with America's own poverty crisis? Here's what our expert said.
Well, we can see sometimes that America, the government in America, we are talking about the administration, the American administration, unfortunately they seem like they care about Israel more than some of their own states. That's why, as you said, we see some states, they are living in very poverty level. We see that some states, they are suffering of housing crisis and very high rate of unemployment. And in that time, we see the American give billions and billions of cash aids and arms aids to Israel. This makes you think twice. Should America care about their own people first or give all this money and arms to Israel? I think, again, this is not because of anything, but because of the strength and the influential of the pro-Israeli lobby in America. And unfortunately, these people, which is the pressure groups and pressure lobby, they are very strong and they are caring about their own interests rather than caring about the ordinary American people interest and affairs.
The United States regime has never cared about its own people, but it has cared to the small amount to facilitate its genocidal strategy towards the native people of the Americas, very similar model that Tel Aviv has used against the native people of Palestine. So when we see the United States supplying in billions of dollars annually to probably the most unjust regime, an open apartheid colonial settler regime on the planet, it's clear where its priorities lie and it's clear what its own true nature is in regard and if we observe this relationship and dynamic with another white settler colonial regime.
And so the US continues to fund and arm Israel, despite escalating violence against Palestinians. To many, this suggests that Washington cares more about selling weapons than it does about human rights of Palestinians and the financial stability of its own citizens. Only Washington can explain why it seems less worried about supporting poor Americans at home than it does about funding the killing of Palestinians abroad.